Hey, it's Ben Oofana today. I'm joined by Tyr Throne, and Tyr is the founder of Somology. And Tyr, you want to tell us about Somology? Because I think you could articulate it. Uh,
Happy to. So
yeah,
somology is soma, which means the living body, and ology, which means science. And it's the art and science of the living body. So it's studying how the physical, emotional, and spiritual fit together and are affected by each other. And it's a combined system of deep body work and also movement education.
yeah. Today we're talking about how you can go about healing and transforming relational trauma that's held within the body. And oh, many of us, I mean, it's so commonplace. We've gone through all kinds of, you know, anything from childhood. We started out, maybe grew up in dysfunctional families. I think for the most part, our parents were doing the best they could with the resources and understanding they possessed. Not always, but most of the time, I believe. And yet, many of us develop with these profound emotional wounds, and often that translates into we start enacting that in our intimate or not so intimate relationships, our attempts to form relationships, and many of us get hurt along the way, and sometimes experience profound devastation, and we carry much of the emotional wounding within our bodies. And for years, I've explored different therapeutic interventions. Uh, I know I myself, in times past, carrying that trauma, was so deeply wounded, and I was willing to do anything within reason. I was determined to do whatever it took to heal these traumatic wounds and to get to a place where I could attract someone into my life and co-create healthier, more meaningful, more deeply fulfilling relationships. And one of the reasons I brought Tyr on today is because, of all the interventions that I've experienced, the work I've done with Tyr has been some of the most profound, especially because, like, for instance, as Tyr and I were speaking earlier, I've done deep tissue body work, and that's a wonderful thing to do if you're going through a breakup or divorce, or you're dealing with whatever kind of heartache, devastation. But Tyr's work is very unique. It's very special in that, yeah, it's partly based on Rolfing, but he's integrated numerous forms of body work. He's trained with a number of people, which he can go into in a minute and tell you more of the details, the specifics. But there's ways in which our bodies become so incredibly contracted, twisted, tangled up around these profound experiences of loss. And whereas, like, when I would just do deep tissue massage, yeah, it would bring up a lot of the emotion and I could process it. And it was very helpful. But what I found with Tyr's work is that specifically there are ways in which, as I said, my body was so contracted around some of these losses and, just other hardships, struggles in my life. And the way Tyr pulls your body open and aligns your body, brings your body into this alignment, it enables you to access a lot of the trauma, a lot of the emotional wounding that's held within the body that otherwise is tucked away, and it can be very hard to access. But Tyr, what do you have to say?
Um, First, I would like to, I'm so grateful to my teachers. And I did the complete training in structural integration with the son of Ida Rolf, Richard Demerly.
Mhm.
And he was an amazing teacher. And I'm certified in Feldenkrais and neurolinguistic programming, craniosacral. But a lot of my training was from this laboratory as a professional dancer. And so many of my dance teachers had a profound effect on me and how to free this instrument up. And I know a lot of work is based on like categorizing, like, you know, men are like this, women are like this, and you treat men like this and you treat women like this. But that's, to me, too much in the box. And I
Mhm.
would rather Ben and Mary and Sean. So what I mean is, how does, you know, each person shares with me their goals, and then I need to really see them and really hear them and really feel them and really understand them. The difference from other bodywork system is if you lay someone down flat on the table and you just look for the tight spots and you're just releasing all the tight spots and everything, that's a wonderful service. That's a wonderful thing to do. People will feel better. But I work very differently because I see. So you stand and you talk about your feelings and your goals and your wishes, and I try to see how things are twisted or distorted or what's held or what's tense. And I'm looking at the difference in how someone is distorted because we're all affected by everything that happens to us. I
Mhm.
mean, we think that we think and we feel separately, but we really flink, which is feeling and thinking as a synesthesia. For example, you think very differently if you're drowning in the physical reality and struggling, or if you're warm and safe in your bed. It's a
Mhm.
very different feeling. You're thinking differently when you're falling in love or when you're heartbroken.
Mhm.
So, what I'm looking for is with each person to understand their goals and see how I can untwist them. So, everyone is, you know, they're doing fine in terms of they can walk to the store and get some food and get home and function. But I'm looking at them and saying, what would the ideal look like if they were perfectly free and it was effortless to stand and walk and to move forward
Mhm.
in their lives?
So there's some differences in the way we work, because we have very different capabilities or gifts. And what I'm curious is, or to hear you describe, I know some degree, but I want to have you explain it to listeners, and then I'll describe what I see as I work with people. Is when you're working with people who maybe they've gone through a devastating breakup, they're in the midst of a divorce, or they're dealing with patterns of abandonment, rejection, unrequited love. How does that materialize in the body? Like, how does it express itself through the body? What are the specific, structural manifestations of that? First, you describe, and then I'll come back and describe some of what I see working with people.
So each of us is a map of our entire life, our existence, our past. And our fate, you know, the face of an older person you'll see a reflection of their worldview.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking, you know, depending on their goals, whether they want to feel more comfortable being alone or whether they want to free up blocks so they can attract a partner, whether they want to. So each person's goals are different. So first I'm looking for that. And then while they're talking, I'm saying, well, based on what I'm seeing, why would they think that way? Why would they feel that way? And what happens in a we're designed for movement, to run, to to move, to get food, to drink, to protect and take care of ourselves and increase our enjoyment of life. But every time you get someone says I don't love you, or every time you get fired, or every time you don't get an audition, there's a kind of hurt that comes in, that's felt,
Mhm.
and it can be released, but a lot of the times it's held, and it becomes like a self-fulfilling philosophy, and the person will have a feeling in their body, like someone might have a feeling in their body like, oh, you can't trust anyone,
Mhm.
you know or all men are assholes, which is kind of true, but if the feeling in the body is, if all that pain from all the men that have hurt them, and whether the person is gay or a woman, all the men that have hurt them, if cle- that clouds the vision of the world, and they're walking down the street hunched over and looking down, and all they see is how dirty everything is, and
Mhm.
and so if they're wanting to feel better, and I'm helping them to open up and make their head lighter, and their posture improves, and they're walking down the street and they go, wow, there's beauty in the world.
Mhm.
And yes, some men are terrible, and other men are good, and I can better see that now and feel that now. And it and they have a lightness of being. They have a lighter feeling. They don't have all the past holding them down and twisting them and distorting them and limiting their thinking. The metaphor is like, if you've been beaten, either physically or emotionally, that if you've been beaten down, it's like a boat that's like old and sinking and falling apart and floundering. And if we can rebuild everything more towards the ideal, so the the posture is free and easy, the movement is free and easy, the breathing is free and easy, the thinking is free and easy. It's more like it's like a better boat. You're feeling more like the captain of your life, that you can move forward in your life. If someone's going at the computer a lot, and the weight of their head is going forward and compressing their chest, how's their breathing? And how's the blood flow to the brain? They're actually less intelligent, because
Mhm.
the blood flow to the brain is restricted. It's a physical thing. And if their head is in a better position and it's lighter and freer, the breathing is enhanced and the blood flow to the brain is enhanced, and the person is more intelligent. They think more intelligently.
Right.
The distortions of the body can lead into paranoia and depression and hopelessness and
Mhm.
confusion and delusion. And the free and the thing is, the difference between talk, I do talk with the people a lot, and but mostly I'm doing the body work to free up stuff, because you have a different way of reacting to the world if your posture's like this. The people could be very depressed and with the fake smile,
Mm.
but there's a different feeling from, if I mean, I'm a technician, I'm a nerd, I'm an anatomy and physiology nerd, and if I can increase the ease and comfort in their own skin, the thinking is better. And what's the difference in attractiveness to someone that's like this, like a Richard Nixon neck and a depressed demeanor,
Mhm.
or someone that's open and erect and they move well and move gracefully? There's a very
Mhm.
difference if those two people go to a party, what kind of interactions they're going to have, and what kind of attractiveness is quite different.
Now, when we were doing the sessions, for instance, and we've had discussions about this, how you found that I was so much more open. But one of the things that when you would do the sessions, it would, by dismantling a lot of the armoring that I had in my body, it would, all kinds of emotion would arise, that emotions that were not so easily accessible otherwise. And one of the things I did different from many other people you worked with was I would specifically dive into those emotions. I would drop my awareness down into my body, wherever those emotions and physical sensations arose, and I would breathe from the depth of them. And that made me a lot more malleable, much more responsive and receptive. And I was able to get so much more out of the work that we've done together as a result of that. And I feel that's crucial. Like a lot of people, what I notice is that people that stay in really toxic relationships, relationships where they end up getting hurt, for instance, one of the main things that reinforces the what I call the holding patterns. There's a man who called me just the other day, and I worked with them some time ago, and but he was so resistant to going into, actually feeling his authentic emotional responses, the emotions that were arising in response to what wasn't working in his relationship. And therefore, it maintained the holding pattern and that he's stuck in. So this is so crucial, I find. It's a practice that I intuitively begin to develop. There's a similarity to mindfulness meditation practices, but I've haven't worked with a lot of mindfulness practitioners. I find that the practices I developed actually go a lot deeper, getting people into their bodies and digesting these emotional responses and their life experiences. Because when you can combine these two together, it's going to become a whole lot more powerful.
Well, resistance is an interesting thing. So I'm going to make a silly joke first that I'm irresistible. Now, I'm just joking but what happens is if a therapist is getting what they call resistance, they haven't gotten engagement or agreement. So if someone comes to me and says, they want to have less pain in their neck and shoulders, and they want to be emotionally less afraid and more capable of loving, and they want to spiritually be less confused and have more clarity. And what I do is I do that with one side of their body. So I open that side of the body and I have it be, more able to love in a healthy way and more clear feel clear mechanical forces can go through from the feet to the head, and the breathing is different. And I leave the other side twisted. I don't do anything to it. I just leave it the way that it is. And then I say, well, reflect on these two. And they go, which does your neck feel better? Oh, this feels so much better. How's the neck on this side? Wow, it's really weirdly twisted and distorted. And how would the two sides love differently? And oh, this side I can love myself better. And I feel like I just want to pour love out, here. And this side is very afraid to love and has been hurt and traumatized. And I say, well, how's the spiritual feeling different? And they say, oh, this side I just feel like connected and one. And this side I feel insecure and cut off. And so there's a lot of light bulbs going off and understanding. And I say, well, from in an ecology check, which would you choose for your future? And they say, finish the second side, please. So there's no resistance.
Hmm.
See, if I can do something within 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and they feel, oh, this is better, there's no resistance. There's enthusiastic participation. They're like, yes, I'm getting something that feels right and good to me. It feels valuable and beneficial to me. So there's no resistance. If you're meeting resistance, you haven't gotten agreement,
Hmm.
and you haven't been able to shift. If you're calibrating and they want to get here, and if they want to get here and they're here, you haven't helped them shift that way that they want to. And so, it's just very important to become irresistible, because you're so much coming from love, and you're so much coming from contribution.
Hmm.
And, uh, you know, effectiveness. I mean, I'm just a nerd. I'm just a nerd about the the body and movement and emotions and psychology. And so I'm just a resource. I'm just a fun expert that helps people get what they want, because I've been doing this almost 50 years. And oh, I forgot to mention, one of my most important teachers
Hmm.
is each person.
Hmm.
Each person standing in front of me and says, this is what I want. Why don't I have it? How can you help me? And I have to be like Sherlock Holmes. I have to figure it out by seeing, and by experience. I have so many thousands and thousands of hours of experience helping people, and what I've learned. But I'm learning from each person, because I have to understand you in order to be able to help you. And I have to understand you on levels that you don't even understand yourself, because of blind spots, and also because of just not knowing. So it feels like adding resources and taking away limitations.
I think from some of our discussions, though, as you're working, that you were mentioning the difference between myself and some other people that you're working. You were saying that some people wanted you to just work on the physical, you know, didn't want to go into the emotional. They weren't comfortable going into the emotional. And that you were saying that one of the differences, the reason I was much, much more responsive was because I did dive into the emotional
Oh yeah,
aspect.
you want it, you go for it, you embrace it. It's so there's no resistance.
Hmm.
But it's very interesting. Like, you can have you so integrity is very important, and respect is very important.
Hmm.
So the person might come in and they might say, oh, I just have pain in my neck when I'm at the computer. Emotionally, I'm fine, and
Hmm.
everything like that. And I'll see like a distortion in their leg. I'll ask about that. Oh yeah, when I was a little kid and playing football, I got kicked in the leg, and it hurt very badly, and I haven't been able to run so well since, and I stopped doing sports and everything like that. And but they don't think that that can change. And then I'll be working with them, and I'll see the fear and the timidness and the smallness. And I'll do ecology checks and make sure that's okay, that they want to open in
Hmm.
some of those ways. I might tell stories, and if they're attracted to those stories, and as I help them to open up and get more free, they'll say like, wow, this feels amazing. If I would have known I wanted it, I would have wanted it all my life. That's what one doctor said when he came. And they go back home, and their partner says, wow, what happened to you? You look more beautiful, you
Hmm.
know, and they mean attractive. And so it's and that's why, the people will come. But I remember one very famous ballet teacher, and he had a lot of neck problems, and he called me up afterwards and he said, "What did you do?" And I
Mhm.
said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, how's your neck feel?" He says, "My neck feels great, but what did you do?" And I said, what do you mean? What are you asking me?" He says, "I feel well."
Mhm.
And he was walking down the street feeling well. And that's what happens if you can release the distortions and the twists. But it's different. See, in most body work, if you're just laying someone down on the table and just rubbing the tight spots, they stand up and they're still a mess. In
Right.
terms of their posture, their movement may improve just slightly, but it's still in the luck category.
Mhm.
Although there's a lot of benefit going on, it's still a wonderful thing to do. But if you're more disciplined and more precise, and you untwist them and you allow them to be already straight. See, a lot of other systems are like, hold your shoulders back, hold your stomach in, hold yourself straight. And this actually, I think it's terrible, because the person becomes more stiff and they become actually more tense. But if
Mhm.
I'm doing my job and freeing up everything that's distorting you, and you just stand up and you go, wow, I've never stood this tall in my life.
Mhm.
It's never been this easy to stand. I didn't know a head could feel so light. See, what happens if you make someone's head feel lighter? They have the feeling life is easier.
Mhm.
That's not a small thing. That's life changing.
So, Tier, when we were doing sessions, we'd have these conversations, and you described some of the specifics of how the wounding expresses in men's bodies and women's bodies. I want to talk about both straight as well as gay,
Mm.
lesbian differences you notice, and then I'll describe some of what I notice in working with people.
Mm.
But how do you? I mean, because you gave some very, very specific examples of what you saw happening as you would work with women, how that wounding showed up in women's bodies more frequently, and different ways that it showed up in men's bodies, and again, um, being inclusive here, addressing both straight, heterosexual, and gay, lesbian.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first, I'm an ally. You
Mhm.
know, I'm an ally to the LGBTQ community and to the people of color community. And so, if as a sensitive, empathic person, women live with a level of fear that men cannot imagine.
Mhm.
Men are not as afraid to go into the parking lot for their car if they're alone.
Mhm.
Women are living with an enormous amount of fear. You know, uh, Black people, because of racial, especially men, because of racial
Mhm.
profiling, of the criminalizing of in the media and everything, it's a, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of
Mhm.
burden. You know, they're much more likely to be attacked by a policeman,
Are shot.
um, or killed. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, and in terms of the LGBTQ plus community, we're living in I'm going to say, when I say homophobic, I mean the blanketing, like the precise for each person, LGBTQ plus, each person. I'm just going to call that homophobic society, where
Mhm.
they have around them other influences where they have to suppress themselves when they feel they can't come
Mhm.
out, or they're in certain situations. And so everyone, I need to be compassionate to the person. But like I was saying earlier, I don't have a box system. I don't have
Mhm.
like, astrology has a like categorizing system, and many other systems categorize, men, women, LGBTQ is different from straight. No, I'm really seeing
Mhm.
how to Ben, and how
Mhm.
to, Sarah, and how each person and looking for the trauma. See, that's the advantage of looking for distortion.
Like,
See,
what
if
is
you
the
if you're
specific
really
distortion?
seeing, sorry.
What is the specific distortion? Like, maybe describe in the body, like what you'll see first with women and then with men. What are those specific distortions themselves? How do they, what do you see? What do you feel? The actual distortion
Well,
in the body.
it's with each person.
Yeah.
See, it's very different if you're looking at the landscape than
Okay.
if you're just thinking, oh, men are like this, women are like this, straight
I
people
know,
are
but
like this, gay
there are
people are like
some
this.
common patterns that tend to manifest, and you're describing them before, so that's what I want to hear you elaborate on. There were very specific patterns that you're describing, that you were seeing certain types of physical manifestations, and I, I'd love to hear that, and I know the viewers would too.
Well, see, I'm not I, maybe you could talk about exactly what I said or something, because in the moment I'm telling a teaching story,
Yeah,
but in the moment when I'm with the person, I'm looking at the landscape. See, that's the
yeah,
advantage of looking for the way that someone is like, they might have been taught. They might, when they relax, go like this, but when they're aware of themselves, go like this, pull their
hmm,
shoulders back. And the thing is, if 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 I'm Romeo and walking towards Juliet while I'm pulling my shoulders back,
hmm,
how does that feel? Or if I'm Romeo and walking towards Juliet and my shoulders are moving,
hmm,
which is the difference in attractiveness?
hmm,
But also, to somewhat address your question, is many people present as anger
hmm.
because they're afraid to feel fear.
How does that
So they're
anger look?
feeling fear, and they're so afraid of fear that they would rather default into anger, because anger makes you feel strong and
Yeah,
fear makes you feel weak. And rather than be vulnerable and say, I'm feeling vulnerable right now, can you please listen, or can you please stop being abusive, or something like
hmm,
that, they'll go into fear and, I'm sorry, anger, and be very
hmm,
aggressive, because then they'll feel stronger in their body, and they'll say, because what anger does is make you right and make you that you can kill,
hmm,
so it makes you so that you're full, you're pumped up. um, but I think vulnerability is more of a superpower.
hmm,
So if you had, but to somewhat address your question, so men have this act that they're supposed to perform where they're wooden.
hmm,
And to include what you were talking about earlier is to address a little bit the numbing.
hmm,
So what happened in medicine, we call the threshold of arousal
hmm,
is the place at which you can feel.
hmm,
So people that are in chronically pain, they're lowering their threshold of arousal so they can feel less.
hmm,
But the problem is they can also then feel less pleasure. And the
hmm,
same thing happens emotionally. The more the person is criticized or judged or abused, the more they're lowering their threshold of arousal to, be able to somewhat tolerate the horrible things that are happening to them. But then they're cutting off the level of pleasure. And after a while, they can feel no pleasure. So they're just like trying to use alcohol or food or drugs or watching entertainment to affect their feeling. And so if they're the nice thing about this kind of body work is it's quicker. Like, talking about therapy is absolutely wonderful. Talk therapy is a fantastic thing to do. And also the reflectiveness of that, the talking to yourself that is involved in there.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can very quickly free the holding from like an abusive parent that's happening, and the always feeling that they have to protect themselves from this abusive parent, and then they're 45 years old, that parent is already dead, and they
Mm-hmm.
still are holding themselves like this, and then they're going in to meet someone and they're saying, why is it so hard to meet people, why is nobody attracted to me, and their therapist says, you should be more courageous, and oh yes, I'm going to be more courageous. But it's a different thing if I know the shape of courage and
Mm-hmm.
the form of courage, and they say they want to be more courageous, and I'm opening them and they say, wow, I am courageous, and I'm surprised how peaceful it feels.
Mm.
I thought courageous would be scary. It used to be scary to be courageous, but it feels so peaceful and kind.
So what I notice in people, uh, wow, there's several things I want to comment on. One is the vulnerability, and that especially for those who have suffered a great deal of trauma, as I did growing up, and on one hand, there's the we kind of default to anger, and it could be a protective mechanism, but underneath it, there's this profound vulnerability, and I found that years ago. I found myself attracted to and attracting women that were themselves very wounded, and some were quite hurtful or abusive themselves. And but the vulnerability was so deeply ingrained. I mean, it was just like hardwired. And so, having trained with a traditional Native American doctor, a medicine man, and part of the training that we go through, my mentor would transmit portions of his own healing gifts to me. But then, in order to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing, he had me go on the vision quest. Vision quest, you go like 4 days and nights alone into the mountains with no food and water. I missed a number of years in my 20s, but I started going back at 31. And I just assumed that, well, okay, I'll go as my mentor did, and these other native doctors, and this is how I'll develop to higher levels, receive additional gifts of healing. But what I didn't anticipate, what I didn't realize ahead of time was going to happen is, as I would be on the mountain during that 4 days and nights, especially on the fourth night, and there were times I'd feel this extraordinarily powerful presence within my body, and there were parts of it that were like a near-death experience, portions of my life flashing before my eyes, and I would actually relive some of these experiences that were so traumatic, many of which I had forgotten about altogether. But as that would happen, I would feel it just reconfiguring those parts of me that, where that vulnerability was hardwired in there. And so it built this whole different foundation. And so as I would go forward into the world and I would meet new potential partners or enter into a new relationship or something, I was no longer in that place where I was so wounded, where I was in that deeply vulnerable state. And so I found it essential to, in doing this work, to be able to heal and transform some of these wounds that were so deeply entrenched, so configured in there. Another thing that I've found is that in working with people, I find that most people never, that people who have gone through these really devastating breakups, people with these long-standing patterns of abandonment, unrequited love, attracting individuals into their lives that, it's, in other words, they keep choosing the wrong person. But what happens is many people, and especially the fact that in this society, we're not taught how to work effectively with our own authentic emotional responses. And so what happens is I look in people's bodies, often months, years, even decades after these devastating losses or these reoccurring patterns of, say, abandonment, unrequited love. And I see and I feel the pain, the grief, the devastation that they're holding in their body. It's like they haven't processed that. And as long as these emotions are held in the body because they haven't processed these extraordinarily painful experiences, that perpetuates the pattern. Um, they continue to reenact the same kinds of relational dynamics. They continue either to attract the same kinds of people, some people just chronically alone, they don't attract anyone at all. Um, and so, we were talking about some of the differences in our different approaches to working. We possess different skill sets, different gifts or capabilities. So the traditional Native American doctors, how they work, and I'm trained by one, so I work in the same manner, is that, you had Native Americans, for instance, and they're living in the wild. They don't have access to the modern medical interventions. They hadn't learned any of these like very sophisticated skill sets, for instance, like you possess to physically work with the body and restructure it, through the techniques that you employ. But traditional Native doctors act as conduits. Having gone, often they apprenticed and they would receive these transmissions of these gifts of healing. They would go through the vision quest. They would continue to receive other kinds of healing gifts, capabilities. Some were known for specifically treating like digestive disorders, others neurological disorders. So they all had their areas of specialization, which I do too as well. But in specifically working with those who have, gone through these devastating losses, what's happening is that it's taking these life experiences that were so painful. And when people experience these losses, it's like the body mind on its own, just to a large extent, doesn't have the capacity to thoroughly digest and assimilate these events, those subsequent highly charged emotions. So as I work with people, it's like it's taking all that experience, all these highly charged emotions, and they're like thoroughly digesting, assimilating it. And so they'll come out the other side. And I see them let go of attachments that are really unhealthy. Maybe if they are strung out on someone who's not reciprocating their desire for a relationship. Other people who are in very toxic, destructive relationships, that attachment dissolves and they let go of that individual and they're able to move on. And I see the same individuals move on to attract other companions into their life with whom they can create more meaningful and more deeply fulfilling relationships. So just describing a bit some of the differences in our approaches, the different kinds of skill sets or healing gifts we have and how they, and what I encourage people to do is, like, for instance, I will encourage people to do body work. I would, again, say, encourage someone to work with Tier and then to do the physical structural aspect. And then as I work with them on a whole different level, then it's going in and taking a lot of that devastation, those experiences, they're digesting it, they're digesting that, all those highly charged emotions resulting from the breakup, the divorce, those repeated experiences of abandonment. So working on very, very different levels.
Is there a question in there?
No, I'm just curious if you want to jump in, add to that.
Oh, all right. So for me, it's looking at what's holding you back
Hmm.
physically, and how can I free it so it's more easy for you to move forward?
Hmm.
It's more easy for you to think, to breathe, to stand, to walk, to sit. And the way it shows up, it depends on the person's goals. Like one person might end an abusive relationship.
Hmm.
Someone else might demand healthy boundaries and be able to transform an abusive relationship into a healthy one.
Hmm.
Uh, Someone else had had the courage to ask for a raise. Someone else, the confidence to completely leave that line of work and find something that's soul fulfilling instead of soul crushing. I'm a resource. The
Hmm.
people give me their goals and I'm looking, well, what's causing this problem and what would need to happen to help them to have what they want? What's like the next step? Do I have to release something in their, do I have to organize their legs better so they feel more trust? There was a violinist who came and afterwards she said, I feel wonderful. Can you help children who've been sexually abused? And
Hmm.
I said, yes, but I would want their caregivers to be there, the caretakers, the doctors and everything, their support network to be there and participate in the workshop.
Hmm.
And we did, before and after videos of them walking uh, one direction on the room and then running the other direction. And the way that they were running was so distorted. And all I did was help them to be able to use their legs to turn their heads. And uh, through the whole workshop, there was just a lot more laughter and a lot more because I'm very funny and joking around, and there was a lot of trust built because they were very afraid around men because men had been their abusers. So I, by the end, it was making them feel safe and making them feel comfortable, and they were just moving better. And within 2 hours, the way that they walked and the way that they run, I was just weeping. All the doctors were weeping. They just was just so much more free and beautiful.
Hmm.
And the sexual trauma was around the pelvis, but I didn't say, oh, you have to free your pelvis and we have to dig in there and hurt you really hard. Like, no, if their legs are moving their head better, it's going through the pelvis, through the body. And so there's not a block there.
Hmm.
There's a freedom in the movement, and their nervous system likes it. They go, this feels better. And had them do it, the other way, back and forth. So they're feeling this and they go, no, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to live where I'm have mobility and potential, and I can move more easily. I can breathe more easily. I had them go back and forth, like they're starting the workshop like this, and I had them go back to that, and they say, "How do you feel about yourself?" And then and they found this new way, and I say, "How do you feel about yourself now?" And all the way from 6 to 16, because there's quite a big difference in the age in this group, they
Hmm.
they're figuring it out for themselves. See, my work is very different. A lot of work is like saying, well, you should hold your shoulders back and do this and do this and do this, and it's a authoritarian yelling at yourself. And I say, no, I'm going to help you feel.
Hmm.
And You just feel, does it feel better to be like this, or does it feel better to be like this? But at first, you can't be like this because there's so many tight things in your fascia and in your muscles and in your tendons holding you like this because you've been like this for so long, that if you try to sit up straight, it's incredibly painful because you're fighting against all this elastic recoil. So
Mhm.
if I go and I release all that elastic recoil and I lengthen the front, so it's effortless for you to sit like this. You
Mm.
don't have to try to sit straight. You're sculpted straight. And you go, wow, I had no idea sitting could be so easy. I
Mhm.
had no idea I could breathe like this. I've never been able to breathe like this in my life. I
Mhm.
had no idea my head could feel, my neck could feel free and comfortable. If your head is, I call the Monday head, the head's going on Monday, the body comes on Tuesday, you cut it off from your emotions,
Mhm.
and you can get a massage every single day and your neck's still going to get tense. See, if I'm holding a ballerina up here, it's fun. But if I have to hold the ballerina out here, it's very heavy. So if your head is here, there's no way your neck can't be tense. That's just a
Mhm.
mechanical fact. Hold a
Mhm.
chair out in front of your body, you can't be relaxed.
Mhm.
But and if you try to not hold your head forward, it doesn't work. It's very tense. So if
Mm.
I'm very methodically, very precisely freeing up things and freeing up the torso and the body so the head just balances, it doesn't need any neck tension to hold itself up. It's balancing on the bones, and the muscles are available for very subtle and fine movements. So the
Mm.
thinking is very different. At this place, you can feel and refine. Is that person lying to me, or are they telling the truth? Or do they not even know what the truth is? They're delusional. But if you're here, you're so uncomfortable, you're like, am I feeling uncomfortable in my body because of me or because of them?
Mm.
It's a very distorted system. The lens is completely distorted. So as the But I'm talking about something that's rare. I'm in New York City right now, and there's maybe one person out of the millions that has their head balanced. And they might be a professional athlete or a ballet dancer. A lot of ballet dancers are very stiff, holding themselves straight.
Mm.
But this is a whole different thing. And it's also important because what if you could not only untwist the body, but untwist the thinking that twisted the body?
Mhm.
Now, in order to do that, I use the side by side thing where I'm freeing up one side so it's more ideal, it's a different shape. If the person's standing, they're feeling, oh, this side I stand so easily, I even feel uplifted. And then the other side, I feel so many distortions and twisted, the side I haven't treated yet. And they're saying, and then I'm having them look at that with compassion, and they can say, if I look at this, I can really see why I feel so bad all the time.
Mm.
And then I say, well, how does the other side feel? And the other side feels like, I want to go take a walk. I want to feel this. I want to live into this. This is freedom.
I know, years ago, like, you were talking about how, you can get a massage every day, and your neck, you would go back, to that position, and there was a time, um, God, when was this? I think about 20 years ago, and I would work with this massage therapist, and my neck, and upper back and shoulders would just, I mean, it really helped at the time. I could feel it just releasing
Hmm.
in that moment. But usually, even by before the day was over, and especially into the next day, I could feel it clenching back up. So instinctively, I was on a commuter train, and I just brought my full awareness into my neck, shoulders, upper back, and just center my awareness in that tension and begin to breathe softly and deeply and follow those sensations. And after about 6 months, the same um, woman who's doing the deep tissue body work, and she was like shocked. It's like, what did you do here? It's like before we'd have to work like an hour or longer in your neck, shoulders, upper back, and and then even after all that time, it would just contract again and go back to where it was. And this time I've worked 15 minutes, and everything opened up and it's where it needs to be. And we have all this time to work on the other parts of your body that we didn't have time to work on before. And so I find that the importance of combining the deep emotional work with the body work is crucial. And I think you mentioned something else when you were talking before about, a lot of times whether people are trapped in these really dysfunctional relationships, or maybe they're in their professional life, where they're just in situations where they end up being very, very compromised. And a lot of times what I find is that there's a lot of the emotional wounding, the fact that people are not accessing the emotions held on these very, very deep levels. And this, especially when we experience events that were so extraordinarily painful, we've held a lot of these emotions within our bodies for so long. There's a lot of numbing, a lot of disconnect. There's very elaborate defense mechanisms that develop, that are established. And so therefore people are not able to access the feelings. And yet it creates this like filter through which they're perceiving their reality, but they're not really all that conscious or cognizant of the filter they're seeing through. And there's varying degrees of like numbing, disconnect. They're just, again, they're not fully cognizant of what they're in. I don't know, maybe another example, the fish in water doesn't realize it's wet or something. It's like they're in this field. But what I have found, like repeatedly, as I'd go through the vision quest, it's like this dissolving of these layers, and then I could see and feel, perceive more clearly, recognize the dysfunction I was trapped in. I could see the individuals with whom I was relating more clearly, more objectively. And I've found this working with numerous individuals where a lot of people, they lack this lucidity, this clarity. They can't really see what they're doing. And they're trapped in these patterns. I've also, you know, and again, I have tremendous appreciation for the work you're doing structurally realigning people, and it just opens their vision in a way. But I've also seen many times I would work with individuals. One woman, for instance, somehow her pelvic girdle was rotated around. Um, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but instead of being open, the pelvic girdle was rotated forward, and she was working with an osteopath who had been working with her for quite some time, and yet he wasn't able to affect the change that he wanted to bring about. And in the first session I did with her, her pelvic girdle just opened up, and she could feel it happen on the table. And when she went back to work with the osteopath, and he was just absolutely stunned, shocked that how in one session that opened up. And so a lot of this emotional wounding that we carry, and it shows up in so many different aspects of our lives, whether it's in our relationships, our It could be thwarting us in terms of our ability to succeed in our professional lives, stunting us where we're just not achieving our goals. And because we can't access these emotions in many instances, that maintains the holding pattern. What I find working with people is that, especially the more I can get people deep into the emotions, the more receptive they are to go into those places where they're extraordinarily vulnerable. And we do the practice. I take them into the depth of the emotions, teach them how to work constructively with their emotions, and then doing the work on the table. And this extraordinarily painful experiences and these emotions are digested. And then there's that awareness, there's that lucidity. And so I'm just kind of describing, contrasting on some of the differences in our approaches, how we approach different individuals, our different ways of approaching the individual and the wounding that they carry.
Yeah, for me, it's important to see it with compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different from talking with someone about it. If people repeat their stories, to feel listened to is wonderful. That's a very fabulous thing. But repeating their stories can keep someone also stuck in their stories.
Mm.
This woman the other day was furious. She was like, I'm furious with my partner. I never want to be in a relationship with an alcoholic again. And I was, well, how many times have you been married? 4 times. And how many of them have been alcoholics? All of them.
Mm.
And I just paused until the irony could be realized. And so when I worked with one side and she was freeing into a more healthy organization and leaving the other side just the way that it was, and she was looking at that, she saw the twisted tendency towards her past behavior. And she saw a vision of a new way of being. And she made remarkable changes in her life. I was weeping the other day, this woman who'd been in pain for like 40 years in her back. And my Russian isn't that good, so her daughter was translating. And after the session, she was dancing around the room. This grandmother was dancing around the room, and she was saying, "I have no pain. I don't even remember what this is like." After an hour, and I was crying. The daughter was crying. It was so beautiful. And she says, "I really wanted to be able to walk down to the lake, and I haven't been able to even walk to the lake." And she went and she walked all the way around the lake.
Mm.
And she can do that every day now. And she knows how to not have any back pain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a difference in each person's goals. Is, for me, I'm really being in service.
Mm.
I'm being in service of your goals. And it's not, people can, that was just one time. They don't have to come back. I'm fixing a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want to go deeper, fine. They can have deeper goals, and I'm happy to help them with that. But it's really trying to, a lot of our struggles are we want to be like that, but we are like this. So I'm saying, well, how can I free this so you can be how you want to be? Now, you can feel like that after an hour, how you want to feel. And then you go out in the world and you see what else do you want? And you go for it. Or if you see me as a resource, then you give me other challenges to enjoy exploring with you. It's a participatory thing. When I'm working, you're participating. You're moving in certain very precise ways to free up. And you're freeing up from the inside while I'm pressing from the outside. Like, you know, if you have a mosquito bite, you scratch it like this. But how does a bear scratch an itch in its back against a tree? So you're rubbing against me while I'm, you know, scientifically pressing and lengthening and other things, but you're fully participating. And the interesting thing about that, like, is if you feel you're too closed, I'll push you more closed. But we're first clear, you want to be less closed, more open. I'll push you more closed and you'll reach out more open. And then I'll stretch everything out that's holding you closed, and you can just be that way.
Mm-hmm.
The things that were holding you closed or small or old or depressed or hopeless, those things are changed. So you feel uplifted and optimistic and charismatic, and your energy level goes up enormously so you can be more productive. And this affects all aspects of your life, but it's all achieved by you giving me the goals, saying, I want to feel less like this and more like this.
I know, you know, you commented on the story, and that a lot of people, unfortunately, become so trapped in their stories. And one of the biggest dangers of when we keep reverting into our stories is that we go up into our head, and it creates more of a disconnect where, again, we're up in our heads, and there's that disconnect from the body. And there's this, what I notice that happens is the mind will be spinning with that narrative, and yet simultaneously it's generating, it's stirring, churning more of those emotions that, you know, if you're telling this really sad, really painful story about the drama that's playing out in your current relationships, and how you were hurt at different times in the past, and you keep telling that story, again, you're up in your head, and yet it's churning these emotions that are being generated down in your body. And so what happens is there's more of those emotions because you have that disconnect. The emotions are building and they're actually accumulating down in the body. And so that reinforces the stuckness with that separation between the intellect.
Or they get bored of their stories.
Oh
They
God,
keep telling this story often enough that they become free of it because it's boring.
you know, I
It's
rarely see anyone just get so bored of it, in a sense, in some instances, but I see a lot of people, and it's just they it reinforces their stuckness. And so I find it so important to drop people and different approaches to different tools and resources to do so. One, make them drop their awareness down into the emotions when they're telling their story. Interrupt story at a certain point and say, okay, I hear that, I know that story, but what's the deepest feeling? What are the deepest feelings? Where is that feeling, or where are those feelings landing in your body? And I get them to center down in their body, experiencing the actual emotions. And some people, it could be very difficult because they've numbed themselves so much. When I can get them into their emotions and breathing from the depth of those emotions, it starts to break apart those that holding pattern. Now, when I can get them to say to
it
work
can,
with
yeah.
you, when I get them to work with you, for instance, and they're doing sessions with you on a physiological level, it's pulling them into their body and it's releasing some of those patterns. Now, when I work with people individually, again, it's bringing them deeper into their body, getting them into their emotions. And there's a lot of these gaps that have developed, and being a conduit, allowing this presence to work through me, what happens is it's taking them in more of an altered or dreamlike state, and they're processing, digesting a lot of these traumatic events, all these emotions, and it facilitates that integration. And there's that dissolving of the story, and there's bringing them into that more embodied state, and they're growing out of the story. They're becoming more whole, more integrated, all that. So again, I feel it's so important that we incorporate these various the practices like I described, getting out of the head into the feelings, into the body, integrating like the body work as you do these indigenous healing practices, such as I work with as well, in order to get the greatest, bring about the greatest transformation.
Yeah, beautiful.
Building a new foundation from which
Yes,
you
I
can
think,
relate on much healthier levels.
yes, I think we have to try different methods and feel what we resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, have been doing this almost 50 years. I'm almost 70. And when I was in pre-med school, I started doing this work when I was in my 20s. And it's just being of service and learning and helping someone to be free in their tissues, in their body. And the thinking is different. There actually is no separation between the mind and the body, but you can sit at the computer for many hours and shut the body down so that it's numb and it's dead, and you're just like an occupant in a car driving through life. But actually, scientifically proven, there's no, we think, if the body dies, you can't think. We are our bodies. And so the improvement, the quickest way to improve is to change the physiology, which is a fancy word for organization. So increase the level, the quality of the organization, the intelligence of the organization, the intelligence with which someone lives inside their body. Because, a map of New York is great, but what good does it do you in Berlin?
Mm-hmm.
None. But I'm a nerd about the body, and when working with me, you quickly understand your body more, yourself more, your emotions more, and you're increasing the map of your body. Now that's very valuable because you can take it to Bali, you can take it to India, you can take it anywhere. You've increased your understanding of yourself, your knowledge of yourself, your use of yourself, your intelligence on many, many levels. And that's just always so beautiful to witness and to see that happening. It's really very beautiful.
God, and you see a lot of people that, for instance, they think if they just discard their current partner, that it's, and yeah, and
Or if they move,
yeah, if you're in a,
you
definitely, if
still
you're in a
take yourself
relationship,
with you if you move.
you take yourself with you. Yeah,
That's why I'm changing the map.
yeah.
We have a map of ourselves, and it's self-limiting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you improve the quality of a map, you improve the quality of the experience,
Yeah,
and you improve the quality of life.
right. Yeah, it's like all these years, like going back to when the traumas were surfacing in my mid 20s, and and there was no escape from that. And so it was that determination, like, okay, what does it take to heal this wounding? And so it was like just diving in and, just exploring different practices, different interventions, and just continuing to take these steps to heal. And combination, like the system and meditation practices I developed, where I learned to dive into the depths of the emotions, doing the deep tissue body work, working with you specifically, Tier, and helping me to like open up these parts of my body and uncontract, do the untwisting, going through the vision quest, all these things. And it's a combination of the practices and the therapeutic interventions and how.
Oh, you're freezing. Oh, it looks like your camera has frozen, but the time is continuing on the video. Well, it's been wonderful speaking with you, Ben, and feeling heard and understood. And I just wanted to say to the viewers that I'm here as a resource if you'd like to feel seen and understood and felt. And we'll share my contact info and Ben's contact info as well.